are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the 2KU Weekly Podcast. We're now officially halfway through the 2023 season. I'm your host, TaipeiJoey101, joined by Danny V and TaipeiJoey today for another recap of today's games. We had an amazing game last night in Beaver Stadium at State College, Pennsylvania, as Penn State beat Michigan to take over control of the Big Ten. We have a lot and more, to discuss today. For our headlines, here's Danny V.
All right, first up, speaking of that game, a field stormer in Happy Valley as Penn State upsets Michigan 34-31 with a last-minute touchdown. Penn State improves the season to 6-0. UCF continues their undefeated streak and beats Cincinnati 30-24. Sparty has fallen. Michigan State has lost to Notre Dame. Second consecutive loss in a row. Colorado slips again, this time to Kansas State. Myrtle Beach gets invaded by Army, and Army upsets Coast Carolina's Cinderella story. Some teams have already clinched their bowl tickets, and I'm sure this is going to be said a lot, but Mr. White, we're going bowling, Mr. White. We don't know what they've been cooking up in Albuquerque, but New Mexico is 6-0 as of now in the season.
New Mexico, not in our game is highlighted, but they got an upset win over San Diego State, who was number 24 at the time, 24-13. We're going to start our recap, though, with a Week 6 score. The Week 6 scores, beginning with the game we saw last night. Penn State, number 16, hosting the Michigan Wolverines. Michigan got off to a great start in this game, but much like against Stanford, they couldn't finish it off as they once again fall on a string game to this time to Penn State as they came back at the last second. Second string tight end Nate Brown made the game-winning catch at the goal line to give Penn State the win, 34-31 over the Wolverines, as Michigan is added to the list of number 7s who lost upon reaching that spot. Michigan now falling in the rankings. We'll talk about that when we get to our top 25. As for Penn State, Danny, have they cemented themselves in control as the team to beat in the Big Ten?
There are also a few other teams who are also in contention. As of now, some of the other teams that are also in contention is Wisconsin, Indiana, and potentially a Notre Dame and Iowa team if they run the table. But Penn State looks like they might be the most surprised team and could win the conference.
Of course, Michigan is not out of it themselves. They are still projected to make it to the Big Ten Championship at the end of the year. Pig Bear?
Yeah, great upset for Penn State wideout. Toughest environment in college football, I have to say it. But yeah, Penn State's got their destiny. I think if they just do their job, they can win the Big Ten.
We now, from the Big Ten to the Conference USA in Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati, the Bearcats were number 19 entering this one, but they were no match for a UCF team. They kept it close, but the number 8 Knights win 30-24 to improve to 6-0 on the season. Danny?
Yeah, UCF has continued to be impressive. What's also interesting to note is that this is their third game where they have to win by barely a touchdown. Other games include their 3 overtime game against Texas Tech, the overtime game against Liberty, and now this one. So UCF's been playing a bit close, and for Cincinnati, it is their first loss of the season, but the rest of their games look really winnable. Rice, UAB, East Carolina, Memphis. The only real teams that could be in contention is Liberty and Louisville, but they play them at home.
Imagine a Conference USA that has 3 teams in one division with at least 10 wins. That would be insane, Danny. Or Pig Bear?
Don't count out the Pirates, Buccaneers, and East Carolina quite yet, but
I would probably count them out, actually, if we look at their...
Count them out.
If we
Pickens gets loud.
They're 1-4.
They're 1-4.
But all right, something kidding.
Their 4 losses are really tough teams, so kind of makes sense.
Don't count them out. But just good win on UCF. Good job knocking off Cincinnati. Good their first loss of the year.
All right. UCF or East Carolina may have a chance to slip past their opponents and win the Conference USA when the conference gets realigned next season. They'll still be there. We'll now move on to from the CUSA to the SEC. Mississippi State was undefeated entering this matchup against Auburn, but it seems like with this game they kind of slipped back to earth and became the Mississippi State we expected them to be entering the year. Though to their credit, this was a very difficult Auburn team, certainly. But 41-27, letting up 41 in your own building, Danny.
Yeah, it was a shocker to see Mississippi State drop like this, but they did at least lose to a good Auburn team, and they at least got competitive for a while. But there are only a few teams in the SEC here that looks like they can be in contention for the title.
Pig Bear?
Eagle, War Damn Eagle. Can Auburn give LSU a 5 for the SEC West? That's going to be something interesting we're going to watch coming down the stretch here.
We will find that out in Week 8.
We'll find out when they match up in Week 8. Auburn controls their own destiny in the SEC West. Their big game against LSU, they have big games against LSU, Georgia, and Florida still on their schedule. Mississippi State's next game is against Georgia Tech, but they have very tough matchups to end the year against Tulane and LSU. It says they play Auburn again, but I don't think that's correct.
I think it's Alabama. Oops.
They already played Alabama too.
And I'll get right back to them.
Technical difficulties here. We're fixing out the sheet. It's Georgia, I believe they play Week 12.
Oh yeah, Georgia. Still a really tough team.
Dear Lord, that stretch is going to be brutal. Georgia Tech, Tulane, LSU, and Georgia. That's going to be very interesting. Tulane is another team I wouldn't count out of that consideration. They've had a very slow start, but I would argue most of their toughest games are behind them. They're probably going to get a win next week against Navy, and I think they could rattle off enough wins to enter that matchup with LSU with potential conference implications on the line. That'll be very fun to follow. Let's head to Dallas for the Red River rivalry. Texas won it last year, and they'll pick up another win this year with a 34-21 win over Oklahoma. This rivalry has lost a lot of luster due to both teams not being as competitive as people had hoped them to be. Obviously, you want some of the best programs in the nation to remain competitive, and if you want to have your historical teams, but it very much feels like the Big 12 has lapped these teams. Regardless, Texas and Oklahoma, whenever they're faced with each other, they'll leave everything out on the field. Danny?
Yeah, it's a shame that both these teams are not as good as they want them to be. However, it does give an opportunity for other teams to improve, like Oklahoma State, Baylor, and Nebraska, but both these teams do control their destiny, and both these teams can make it to a bowl game if they play their cards right.
Pig Bear?
Horns up, baby. Horns up. Good job on Texas winning this great rivalry.
Looking at both their schedules, Oklahoma's tough game is Week 8 against Baylor. They also have a home game against Nebraska before heading on the road for Bedlam. But watch out in between. They don't have a super difficult schedule. But depending on where they get wins, they could end up at 8-4, which would be very interesting to see for them. As for Texas, they're not looking so hot. They have Baylor, Oklahoma State back-to-back, as well as a road matchup against a very difficult Kansas State team, and even Texas Tech, who might be a bit of a challenge on the road. Though I do think I'm more confident in Texas to close things out than I would be for Oklahoma. Still, both teams could end up 8-4 by the end of the regular season. Let's move on to the Megaphone Trophy battle in the Big Ten. Notre Dame taking a win over Michigan State, avenging last season's loss to the Spartans 23-21 in this close-knit matchup. Danny?
Yeah, it was a great match between these two teams. close for both these teams' liking, but I'm sure after their really heart-wrenching loss against Michigan, I'm sure they're happy to at least bounce back against Michigan State. And for Michigan State, that's 2 losses in a row, and my goodness, the rest of their schedule looks like they might have a difficult time going forward.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, just good. Yeah, close one, super close one. Notwithstanding, did I predict Notre Dame to win this game? Get a time back machine.
Gotta get that time back machine. Hopefully Notre Dame can get a time back machine and win the games they were get a time back machine so they could avoid their upcoming schedule. They head to Illinois on the road before their bye in week 8. Then they play Wisconsin, at Minnesota, Northwestern. They're at Penn State, and then they play USC to end the season.
Oh my!
As for Michigan State, it's even worse. They're now 3-3 on the year. They play Michigan on the road before their bye, then Minnesota at Northwestern, versus a plucky Iowa team at Purdue, and then they end against Penn State. We'll go more in depth about the conference standings when we get before we get to the games of next week. Sorry about that. Drew a blank there. Let's go to the ACC for Duke and Maryland. The Duke Blue Devils did not have a great start of the season. They ended up 1-2. However, they've rallied off back-to-back wins and they get a third straight in overtime on the road in College Park against Maryland. And the Blue Devils, after winning 3 straight, have a game against Virginia coming up in Week 7. As for Maryland, their next game is at home against Miami. Danny, your thoughts on these two teams?
Yeah, that Duke has been a really good surprise team because last year they were not really that good, but here they are with wins against Vanderbilt, Miami, Maryland, and FCS Morris Brown. But I could see Duke going to a bowl game, maybe ending the season at around 7 wins at least. Maryland, on the other hand, this is going to be very tough for them because they have Florida State, they have Clemson on their schedule as well, but they could potentially go to a bowl game as well.
I think even 7 wins might be a bit low. I think they could rattle off even more if their cards align. Pig Bear?
Yeah, never count out Duke. I learned that the hard way. But yeah, just good win from the Blue Devils over a Maryland team who's had some plucky wins this season. So good job, Duke.
Maryland's schedule not turning out the way they hoped. They do get Miami this week before a bye. They finish with Florida State, Wake Forest, Clemson, Virginia, and Navy. So the hope is not entirely lost on them. As for Duke, they have Virginia and a road game against Clemson before a bye in Week 9. Then they play Florida State, NC State, and North Carolina all at home before ending their season on the road against Wake Forest. Up next, we're heading to the SEC for one of the best games we didn't see on stream. In a walk-off fashion, number 23 Florida on a 37-yarder takes it home in the swamp over number 9 Georgia Tech. 27-24 the final in this one. Florida was a team that a lot of us wrote off in the race for the SEC East, but they're a one-loss team. They've got several quality wins in Tennessee, Georgia Tech. They play Dave's show next week. Florida may be sneaking up as a potential sleeper pick for the SEC. Danny, your thoughts?
I'm going to say this for the SEC East. 1 week will decide it. Week 9, Florida, Georgia. Both these teams only have 1 loss. They're both looking like they might be the best teams in the conference. And these teams might be able to control their destiny. And for Georgia Tech, might not be going how they wanted to, but they still have plenty of games to knock off more wins.
Mm-hmm. This SEC East is going to be an incredible race. I'll mention Georgia real quick to get that game out of the way. They won 43-21 over Tennessee this week. This 3-dog SEC race, at least in the East, is going to be very interesting. Florida gets Dave's show before a bye and then their road game against Georgia. Kentucky, Auburn, LSU, and Florida State. As for Georgia, they have Kentucky before a bye, then the Florida game, Auburn, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, and Georgia Tech to wrap the year. Now, Georgia Tech already had their bye back in Week 5, so they're continuing play all the way through Week 13. They get Mississippi State, Vanderbilt, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, an FCS matchup against Gardner-Webb before their final game against Georgia. If Georgia Tech runs the table and includes a win over Georgia, they would just need Florida to lose one more time in order to get the tiebreaker and make it to the SEC championships, since Florida lost earlier this season to Vanderbilt. Now, Vanderbilt is also still in the race. They could beat Georgia Tech in Week 8. They play Georgia in Week 11, though their schedule looks a lot less forgiving than the other two schools, because they still have Georgia Tech, Georgia, and Auburn on the schedule. Pig Bear, your thoughts on this SEC race?
So, a 3-dog race with a 4 behind it. This is going to be very interesting. So, correct me if I'm wrong. Vanderbilt has the edge over Florida, and if Florida beat Georgia, that would give Vanderbilt the edge over Georgia too.
They do have the edge over Florida. They have the same, they have the same amount of losses, but Vanderbilt's win was against Florida. Georgia Tech has one loss in conference to Florida, and Georgia's in the lead since they haven't lost in conference yet.
So it's Georgia, Vanderbilt, Florida, Georgia Tech.
Yeah.
It's Georgia, Florida, Georgia Tech, and Vanderbilt. And then the other two teams.
Yeah. Kentucky and Tennessee are trying their best.
Yeah.
Let's head.
Cox too.
They're in the ACC.
Oh, my bad.
Let's head to the ACC now that you bring that up. Virginia Tech, the second best team in the nation, and they wrap up their season before a bye with a win at North Carolina, 34-10. The Hokies are now 6-0. I almost said 7-0. Oh, they've clinched a bowl berth. We'll talk more about that later. As for North Carolina, things are going very poorly. They're 2-4 to start the year. They could rattle off enough wins to get back in the black before their Week 10 bye. They get Florida State, South Carolina, and Virginia in that stretch. They finish, of course, with the Tobacco Road trio of games. As for Virginia Tech, they get Miami and NC State, as well as South Carolina, Dave Show, the big matchup against Clemson in Week 12, and they wrap against their rival Virginia in Week 13. Danny, your thoughts on both VT and UNC?
It's the tale of two opposites. Virginia Tech is looking great. They're undefeated. They could potentially win all the games. In North Carolina, they're not looking hot. They are currently on a 3-game losing streak, and some of their games might be tough for them assuming they don't get their business done.
I could see that Duke matchup being a potential trap game, of course. Florida State, a hostile environment as well. Pig Bear, your thoughts on these two teams?
Yes, the ACC, the home of the South Carolina Gamecocks, before we get anybody confused out here. But, yeah, this is not going good for North Carolina. They were ranked earlier on in the season, correct?
Yeah, I believe they peaked in the top 10.
Yeah, this is horrible for North Carolina. It's not good up in Chapel Hill. They need to turn things around quick if they want to even have a chance to make it a bowl game this year.
We were talking national championship for North Carolina at this point in this far into after the postseason was done. But now we're thinking, do they make a bowl at all? I mentioned it.
Their peak this season was at number 12.
Number 12, yeah. As for the rest of the conference, or as for rather Virginia Tech's schedule, they have Miami, NC State, South Carolina, Dave Show, Clemson, and Virginia. I believe I already mentioned that. Sorry about that. We already mentioned the Tennessee game. Let's head to the Mountain West as TCU beats BYU 33-14. The Horned Frogs, after their loss to Utah earlier in the year, still not out of the chase for the national championship. They would need to win out and have everyone above them lose at least once. Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, Boise, who TCU plays later on in the year, as well as Stanford. And you got to hope that no one else tries and sneaks that spot away from them. So TCU, unfortunately, they'll have to become Baylor fans for 1 week. as that's the most likely team to beat the number 1 Oklahoma State. TCU getting the win over BYU improves to 5-1. As for BYU, that's their first loss of the season to TCU. They've started the season 4-0. They get New Mexico on the road next week. A surprisingly tough stretch, actually. New Mexico, Utah State, and Boise State. Before Wyoming, another tough game against San Diego State, as well as wrapping up the season against Utah. Danny, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, is that it is important for BYU to get as many wins as they can because looks like it's going to be a tough second half of the season. They already got their bye in week 5, so they're not getting any breaks. And for TCU, they have Utah State, their bye week, then at San Diego State, New Mexico Air Force, at Boise State, and then the home against Baylor. So both these teams kind of have tough second halves.
Mm-hmm. Pig Bear?
It has to suck being a Baylor fan for that week for TCU. But if they want to keep their head in this, just win out. Really, who's going to deny you? Unless those resumes are so much, just win out. Do your job.
This Mountain West is going to be really exciting this season. It's currently Boise State who looks like the favorites to win it. Though Utah is close behind, and as previously mentioned, New Mexico's undefeated. We didn't highlight it, but New Mexico State, as I mentioned earlier, beat San Diego State on the road in San Diego. They get BYU next week. This New Mexico State team is going to be very interesting, especially riding into that last game against Boise. That team, this New Mexico team being conservative could still be 8-3 entering that Boise State game.
What's really good is that we recently crowned the Mountain West an AQ slot. If New Mexico somehow runs the table, they have a good chance to get into a BCS Bowl.
That is true. We'll keep an eye on that Mountain West race. Our last game we'll highlight here. I'm going to hand it off to Denny as he talks about Dave's show.
Dave's show. This is the most on-brand thing for Dave's show. They started off the season at 3-1 with their one loss win against Clemson. Then at Vanderbilt was a loss. Hoping to come back home, maybe get a good win against UNLV. They love the Las Vegas people, but then, shocker, UNLV won the game 34-20. Now Dave's show is at 3-3, 0.500 in the season, with tough games afterward. And for UNLV, they did just improve to 3-3, but who knows how both these teams will be.
Looking at their schedules going ahead, Dave's show is 3-3, as you mentioned. They get Florida on the road next week before a bye. They also play UCF, a road game against USF, Virginia Tech, and then 2 more ACC games against Florida State and Miami. The Truckers might not be looking too hot in their final year as an independent before their move to the ACC in 2024. As for UNLV, they continue a good run themselves. They rebound from 0-2 to 3-3. They got Wyoming, Colorado State, and Wyoming, Colorado State, which should be wins for this team. But then they face against New Mexico and Utah before a Week 11 bye, and then they finish with BYU and rival Nevada. This is by no means will be an easy stretch for the Rebels, but they may be headed to a bowl game this season. Let's move on now to take a look at our top 25 for this week. The top 25 last week was quite interesting because it was our first with the computer. Now the computer seems to be a lot tamer than it was before. Also, this was the point where Pig Bear didn't forget Utah in his top 25, so that didn't screw them over.
Hey!
We're gonna start from the top of our top 25 and work our way down as usual. And our top 5 did change this week, but only a little bit. Oklahoma State, Virginia Tech, Boise, and Stanford still remain in your top 4. TCU is now 5 as they swap places with Baylor. New to the top 10 is Penn State, who rocketed up in the rankings. They jumped 10 spots and are the biggest risers of this week. Georgia jumps 3 spots into the top 10 as well. UCF falls a little thanks to the computer's stats, down to 9. And Oregon wraps out the top 10. Number 11, jumping up a spot, is LSU. Jumping up 2 is Clemson at number 12. Number 13, back up 3 spots, is Utah, who still remain unbeaten. Number 14 is Auburn, who jumps 4. Or falling 8 spots is Michigan after the loss to Penn State. Number 16 is Florida, who hops up 7 after the win over Georgia Tech. Number 17, up 2 spots, is USC. Number 18 is Georgia Tech, who fell 9 after the loss to the Gators, putting them now as a 2-loss team. Boston College is up 2, putting the Big East back in the top 20. And speaking of, returning to the top 25 at number 20 is Louisville, one of the highest debuts for a top 25 team in recent memory. Number 21 is Coastal Carolina, who fell 6 spots after the loss to Army. I think the computer will be a lot tamer towards them now. Wisconsin is new to the top 25 this season. This is their first appearance. They get Penn State next week. Ooh, man. Colorado fell 10. They're our biggest faller this week as they get another tough loss. This time it was to Kansas State. Then we have 2 more new teams rounding out our top 25. Arizona State out of the Pac-10 and Nebraska from the Big 12. Leaving the top 25 this week is Cincinnati, Michigan State, and San Diego State. For our other teams receiving votes, we have Appalachian State, UTSA, Sam Houston, Cincinnati, Jacksonville State, New Mexico State, Mississippi State, Duke, Kansas State, South Dakota State, San Diego State, and Alabama. Danny, your thoughts on this top 25?
Yeah, it was a really fun top 25, and I know you said the computer seems a bit tamer, but they put UCF at number 5. That was kind of interesting.
North bit tamer.
Still at number 11. And so they did drop them at least, but
baby steps.
It's fun to see how these computer rankings are helping contribute things, and we have a lot of new teams.
Yes, we have we have 4 teams entering the top 25 this week, 3 of which are entering for the first time this year.
And we had a lot of teams receiving votes as well.
Definitely. Pig Bear, your thoughts on this top 25?
I think it's good. Obviously, they're not going to be happy in Baylor with the flip of TCU.
Yeah, they're both relatively equal teams. I would have given Baylor the edge there since they don't have a loss.
Yeah, maybe they should have reworked that.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just got these teams not looking on the end. Clemson, LSU.
Clemson, LSU knocking on the
Utah, Auburn, Michigan. Well, Michigan lost.
Michigan did lose.
Yeah, those teams could be breaking into the top 10 very soon.
I would not count Michigan out of returning to the top 10 at some point.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Big Blue Nation.
We're going to hand it off to Danny as he talks about the teams who clinched our first bowl berths this week. Take it away.
Yeah, we have a good amount of teams who clinched their first bowl spot. First, we got Appalachian State at the SoCon. We just got a win over Washington Lee this weekend. And they're now improved to 6-0. And more 6-0 teams we have is Boise State, UCF, New Mexico, Oklahoma State, Penn State, Stanford, Utah, and Virginia Tech. All these teams are going to get their bye soon, so that does kind of help out. But something that's even more surprising, the amount of teams who are knocking right outside. Their next teams out is Akron, who this weekend will play at Miami of Ohio. We have Arizona State, who this weekend is playing at home against UCLA. We have Auburn, who is actually on bye this weekend, but will play against LSU in Week 8.
Army as well.
We have
Army as well. I think you jumped over them.
Oh, yeah. Army is 5-1. They have a bye week this weekend, but they play again on Week 8 against Air Force. That should get them into that spot. We have Baylor, who is 5-0 after having their early bye week. They play against Texas this weekend on the road at Austin. We have Cincinnati at 5-1, who plays against Rice this weekend. We have Clemson, who is at 5-1, and they are playing against Wake Forest. We have Well, just to knock a lot of these out of the way, Coast Carolina 5-1, Florida 5-1, Georgia 5-1, Iowa 5-1, Jacksonville State out of the American 5-0. Very impressive for the Gamecocks. Louisville 5-1, Mississippi State 5-1, Nebraska 5-1, New Mexico State 5-1. Old Dominion is 5-0 in the season. That's something to keep your eye out throughout this weekend. Excuse me, sorry.
You're good.
Oregon is 5-1. Sam Houston 5-0. South Dakota State 5-1. Southern Illinois 5-1. TCU 5-1. UTSA 5-0, and finally Wisconsin 5-1.
That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
Not as long as our current list of Heisman hopefuls on our Heisman watch. A lot of it remains the same. And Terrence Noel out of Oregon, Travis Heller Clemson, Andrew Burnett from Oregon, Alan Bonner from Oklahoma State, and so on. I believe we touched on this a few weeks ago on a previous show before the Louisville UCF game, I want to say. But added to this list now is Maurice Powers, the quarterback for Penn State, who balled out at home against Michigan last week and made a case for him. He's a transfer, a junior from Colorado State, transferred to the Nittany Lions and has taken this team by storm. He'll be taking on Wisconsin, as we mentioned before. And we're going to start off our list of the Week 7 matchups to close this show out. And we begin with a...
Go over the standings?
We do want to go over the standings. That's correct. I am wrong. Don't listen to me. I'm incorrect. Let's take a look at those standings. We're going to start with the ACC. Make sure to get those in correct order. Thank you. We start with the ACC, as I mentioned. Virginia Tech still very much in control at 3-0 in the conference, 6-0 overall, followed by Clemson and Duke, who are unbeaten. Virginia is 3-2, though they still look quite a ways away from the top spot in the American. Charlotte is 2-0 in conference. Jacksonville State is 1-0, but 5-0 overall, so they would technically hold the top spot in terms of power rankings. The Big East, Boston College very much controls their own destiny, 4-1 with a 3-0 conference record, though Syracuse is knocking on the door, also 3-0. They are 4-2 after starting the season 0-2. The Orange have rattled off 4 straight. They get Pitt at Yankee Stadium next week. The Pitt Panthers are currently sitting at a tie in the lead for the Big East South with West Virginia. Their rivals in Morgantown are also 3-0. They look like heavy favorites to take the conference. Even after starting 1-2, they've rattled off 3 straight in their last few games. The Mountaineers get UMass this week. Also hovering around that spot is Rutgers, who's kind of been hot and cold this season. And Georgetown, who seems to be losing their grip fast. Into the Big Ten we go. Penn State now in control at 6-0 with a 2-0 conference record. Wisconsin is 5-1, right behind them, 2-0 in conference. Indiana is 4-1. Iowa is 5-1 with a 2-1 conference record. Following that, Notre Dame, Michigan, and a bunch of 3s and 2s from the rest of the conference. Into the Big 12, Oklahoma State sitting comfortably on top. Baylor right there in second place, though. Nebraska a few spots down with the 2-1 record because Texas Tech and Texas only have 1 conference win each to their names in all of their conference play, but they're still hovering around. Kansas State, both 4-2, as is a Colorado team who's lost their first 2 games in conference. Into the CUSA, the incredibly stacked top East Division features a 6-0 UCF, a 4-1 Liberty, a 5-1 Louisville, a 5-1 Cincinnati, and even a 3-3 UAB still hovering around. The West is less so. SMU is at 5-1, perfect in conference play through 3 games. Houston is right behind them at 4-2. The Cougars and the Mustangs will play each other in Week 11, likely for the fate of the division. Looking at the independent standings, Army is 5-1 after the win over Coastal Carolina. Dave Show now 3-3. Colgate is 2-3. The Ivy League is sitting in Columbia's hands, who are 1-0 in conference play as things have just started for the Ivy League. Princeton picked up a win in their first game as well, though Penn and Dartmouth lost. So it's not looking to be a crazy year for the Ivy League this season. Into the MAC, Akron is having an incredible run at 5-1. They're the best team in the conference according to Power Rankings. Miami, Ohio is 3-2 with a 1-0 record. Also 4-2 are Kent State and Buffalo, who sit 1-1 in conference play. On the west side, Northern Illinois has a win in conference. They're 4-1 overall, though this seems like a very tightly knit West Division as Toledo, Eastern Michigan, Western Michigan, Central Michigan, Bowling Green, and Ball State are all within a game of each other. The Missouri Valley Conference is currently Southern Illinois to take. They're 5-1 in the East Division, 2-0 overall, or 2-0 in conference, 5-1 with the overall record. Chicago, Western Illinois are their next best opponents, though I don't expect them to be going very far. South Dakota State may be the biggest challenge they end up having. The Salukis and the Jackrabbits play each other in Week 9. Both teams are 5-1 overall and 2-0 in Missouri Valley play. The Mountain West, as we mentioned, is very exciting. New Mexico, and there's a three-way tie for the top spot with New Mexico, Utah, and Boise State all having the same overall record. New Mexico's 3-0 in conference, while the other two are 2-0. TCU is 5-1. Utah State's 4-1. San Diego State's 4-2. And BYU is 4-1 in that conference. The Pac-10. Pac-10's been playing some great football this season. Stanford's 6-0. Arizona State's 5-1. They just entered the top 25. Oregon is 5-1. All three of them are 3-0. USC's 2-1 in conference play. They're 4-1 right behind them. Washington State is 3-2. And UCLA is in 3-3 territory. As we mentioned, the SEC East is crazy so far. Georgia leads at 5-1 and 2-0. Florida is 3-1 in conference, 5-1 overall. Georgia Tech is 3-2 with a 1-1 conference record, and Vanderbilt's behind them at 4-2 and 1-1. For the SEC West, it's more clear cut. Auburn now controls their own destiny with the win over Mississippi State. They're 5-1 with a 2-0 conference record. Mississippi State now 1-1, getting their first loss of the year, sitting at 5-1. LSU is 4-2. They're 1-1. Alabama ineligible, but they're still sitting at 4-2. Tulane and Ole Miss are both 3-3. I wouldn't write out either of them to keep things competitive. In the SoCon's North Division, jokingly named Virginia Division in the doc here, Old Dominion is 5-0. 4 of their games have been in conference so far, and they've won every single one. James Madison, though, is hovering right nearby at 4-2, 2-1 in conference. Also 4-2 is William & Mary. He's sitting still in there. Washington and Lee falling to 0-2 in conference play. They're 3-3 overall. In the South Division, Appalachian State 6-0. They've clinched a bowl berth. They still can't clinch the conference, or rather the division title, until they match up against Georgia Southern in Week 11. The Georgia Southern Eagles seem to control their own destiny entering that game. They're 2-3, but 1-1 in conference play. A Western Carolina is 0-1, but they're still in the hunt for that division as well. Into the Southland, Stephen F. Austin very much in control of the Southland East Division. They're 4-2 with a 2-0 record in conference play. Following that is a sea of threes. 3-3 Southeast Louisiana, Northwestern State, McNeese, all sitting at the same record. Central Arkansas, though, is the only other team to remain unbeaten in conference play. The Bears enter a much easier part of their season coming up, but they have a tough matchup this week against Stephen F. Austin. In the Southland West, though, Abilene Christian is doing very well in their first season in the conference, 3-3, 2-0 in conference play. Sam Houston, though, is 1-0 in conference play and 5-0 overall. Now we move on to the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt East has been very dominant this season, 5-1, 3-0 in the lead. It's Coastal Carolina with a winning record, though at 2-1 is Florida Atlantic. The Owls play Coastal Carolina in Week 11. The Owls could win out and sneak this conference out from under the team that stole it from them last year. As for the West, it's becoming a little clearer who some of the best teams are. Troy is 2-0 in conference, but 2-4 overall. Arkansas State is 1-1 in conference play, 4-2 overall. Same with South Alabama. North Texas improves to 3-2 overall with a win over Navy. They get Georgia State next week. Louisiana 0-5, but I expect that this team gets better since they have a pretty easy schedule to round off the year. Let's head to the WAC to wrap things up. In the WAC, Mountain New Mexico State is in the lead, 3-0 in conference play, 5-1 overall. UTSA, though, right there behind them, they're 5-0 overall and 1-0 in conference. The Roadrunners play the Aggies in Las Cruces in Week 11. That Week 11 is going to be loaded. Also still in the run is Louisiana Tech. They're 4-1. And UTEP is 1-0 in conference play. They could rally off some big wins. Since they've won 3 straight, they were on a bye this week, but they get UTSA. Will they prove themselves to be among the elite? Meanwhile, in the Pacific, it's Cal State Fullerton, who still sits on top at 4-1 with a 1-0 conference record. They were off last week, but they get Texas State next week. Oh boy. Hawaii is 3-2, 1-0 in conference play. San Jose State, Nevada, and Fresno State, I would argue, are all still in it as well. And that will wrap up your overall conference standings. Danny, you have anything you wanna throw out there about these races while I take a glass of water because I need a break for my voice?
These conference games are going to be really, really fun. We have a lot of big matchups coming up soon, especially in the later half of the season, like Week 11, Week 12, and even Week 13. We're going to have a lot of big matchups during that weekend. So I hope you got yourself a lot of food and a lot of drinks to watch.
It's football season. Bad news, I do not have a lot of drinks. I ran out of my water. It's a shame. We're almost done with this stream, though. We're about to go over the top matchups of Week 7. We have our first Tuesday night game. UTSA and UTEP, a game with actual big whack implications. The Roadrunners are clinching a bowl berth with a win. These two teams will move to the CUSA next season. UTEP won the last matchup, though, 23-21, en route to a bowl berth for the Miners. UTSA is favored by 5.5 on the road. Oh, who do you guys have on Tuesday Night Football, Danny?
It's going to be a tough one, but give me the Miners. I think UTEP might be able to pull off the upset, especially with how crazy El Paso can be on when UTEP is doing well. And I'm sure they're willing to come out for this rivalry game.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, I'm going to go UTSA here on a close one.
I think I'll take UTSA as well in this matchup. On Friday, we skip ahead to a potential future conference Sunbelt championship game, rather. Coastal Carolina, number 21 in the country, hosts South Alabama. The Jaguars are 4-2 with a 1-1 Sunbelt record. Coastal Carolina 5-1 and 3-0 in Sunbelt play following their loss to Army last week. Coastal won 51-21 last time these two teams played. The Chanticleers are favored by 2 scores in this one. Give me Coastal to take it. I don't know if this one's going to be particularly close. Danny, what are your thoughts?
It's going to be a really fun matchup. Both the teams have been South Alabama's been quite a surprise. Coastal Carolina, they're just doing what they did from last year. But give me Coastal Carolina to win this game. It's in Myrtle Beach. I'm sure they're angry from that Army loss. And I'm sure Coastal Carolina is going to want to jump out with a big win.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, give me Coastal Carolina winning in Conway, not Myrtle Beach.
Myrtle Beach area. A rivalry near and dear to me, the Paul Bunyan Trophy. Michigan State heads to Ann Arbor to take on the Wolverines. Michigan won last year, 26-23. The Spartans always a challenge, regardless of record for the Wolverines. Of course, there are plenty of classic moments in this series for the Paul Bunyan Trophy. That trophy I do think will be coming home to Michigan this time around. The Wolverines are favored by 7.5 in this game. Danny?
Give me the Wolverines. They should hopefully take care of business. I know it's a rivalry game and kind of the records do get thrown out, but I think Michigan will win this one. I'm sure Ann Arbor's going to be loud, and I'm sure they're going to be welcoming in the Spartans.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, give me Michigan to win.
Growing up in this state, I'll tell you, you're either born a Michigan fan or a State fan, and you wouldn't think it, but the animosity between these two fan bases around here, that you're up there with Auburn and Alabama, I would say, growing up in this environment. Let's hand it off to Danny as he talks about our next matchup on the docket featuring Dave Show.
Yep. Here we are at the Sunshine Smackdown. Dave Show goes up to the Swamp to play against Florida. Currently, Dave Show is 3-3. Florida is 5-1, ranked number 6 in the country. Currently, Florida is favored by 12 points. It's been a really competitive game. Both these teams have gone back and forth, including us even going to them during the 2021 season, kicked off the year.
That was true.
I think for this game, give me the Gators to win it. I think they'll win it in the Swamp. How about you guys?
Florida favored by 12 in this one. Dave Show won the last matchup, though, 41-31. And I believe they won that 2021 matchup as well. Or I think Florida won that, actually.
Florida won it.
That is correct. Dave Show won the last matchup in this game. This Dave Show team has shown itself to win some sneaky games. I think the Gators do win, but closer than the points would have us believe. Pig Bear?
Yeah, give me Gator here.
We're going to move on now to Alabama LSU. 4-2. The Crimson Tide are 1-1 in conference. Number 11 LSU is 4-2 and 1-1 as well. LSU won the last matchup in Tuscaloosa, 58-21. And this is a Crimson Tide team who doesn't give a damn that they're ineligible for the SEC championship in the bowl season. They're gonna give every team a battle in the games that they are playing. We saw this with their game against Florida. We saw it against Penn State as well to start the season. And this is going to be a very interesting game. And call me crazy, but Alabama might have a chance to win this one. We've seen LSU's weakness against a team that I think is a much weaker team in Texas, as well as them struggling. What was their other loss? I'm trying to remember. They struggled against Georgia. That's right. All right, they had a big collapse in that game. Or the opposite. Regardless, I think Alabama will give LSU a challenge and maybe even notch a win in this game. Danny?
Yeah, I think for this matchup, I'm just going to pick LSU because it is in Death Valley. I think that's the only big reason why they should be favored. It's going to be a tough matchup. Death Valley has always been a tough place to play at, so give me LSU to win this game.
Pig Bear?
Yeah, that's gonna be my pick too, LSU.
All right, let's move on now. The 100th year anniversary of the rivalry between Pitt and Syracuse will be this weekend, and to celebrate, they'll be playing it where this rivalry began, at Yankee Stadium in the Bronx. Of course, we'll be having some Yankee Stadium games in the future, and I believe St. John's is currently listed in Yankee Stadium as well. But still a very historic venue. Played host to the Pinstripe Bowl, of course, as well as many historically significant games in early college football history. The Orange are 4-2, 3-0 in conference play. Also 3-0 in conference play is Pitt, who is 3-2 overall. Last time these two played, Syracuse won 30-27. Pitt entering as the underdog. The Orange are favored by 7. I think Syracuse improves to 4-0 and maybe enters the radar of the rankings. Danny?
Yeah, give me Syracuse to win this one as well. It's usually a tough matchup between these two teams. I think Syracuse will celebrate this 100-year anniversary with a dub.
Pig Bear? Pig Bear?
Yeah, give me Syracuse to win this one.
All right. Texas rallying after the win over Oklahoma. Bad news. You get Baylor this week. Baylor beat you 40-10 last season, and they won in 2021 as well. Baylor has now won, 5 straight against the Longhorns this season. Won 5 straight against the Longhorns in Big 12 play. The Bears are 5-0 and 2-0 in conference. Texas 3-2 and 1-0 in conference play. This is obviously, from a college football purist stance, very shocking. Though the Bears are only favored by 3.5 entering Texas, I think Baylor takes it plus the points by a long shot. Give me the Bears to take it. Danny?
Yeah, give me the Bears to win this one as well. The game, it might be an awesome, it might give a little bit of intimidation, but definitely do give me the Bears to win this game.
Pig Bear?
Bears big.
Picking big. Let's head to Conference USA play. Number 20, Louisville is 5-1. They've beaten Georgia. They kept it close against UCF. They've played there all this season. This Louisville team is very good. They're taking on an underrated Houston team who sits at 4-2. The Cardinals are favored by 2. The last time these two teams won, Louisville won. It was the Conference USA Championship back in 2021. That was en route to Louisville going 13-1 with a win in the Sugar Bowl over LSU. Louisville is favored in this game. I'm taking Houston, though. This Houston team is underrated, and I think they're going to pull some more shockers late in the year. Danny?
Yeah, give me Houston as well. These two teams have really been a tough matchup, and they even played earlier in 2021. They played twice. One in the regular season, one in the conference championship. In the regular season, they went to Houston, and Houston won.
That was Louisville's one loss.
I think history repeats here. Give me the Cougars to win this game, and they jump to the top 25.
Maybe. Pig Bear, your thoughts?
Yeah, I got BYU winning. BYU, correct? Sorry.
You're wrong game. This is Louisville, Houston.
Louisville, Houston. Give me Louisville winning here. I think the Cardinals win big too. Okay. Disagree with Danny here.
Danny would love that. Let's move on now to BYU and New Mexico, a game that jumped on our radar immediately. Immediately following New Mexico going 6-0 to start the season. These two teams haven't played since 2021. BYU won that matchup 20-3. This is a very different New Mexico team, a very hungry New Mexico team. The Lobos are favored by 5.5 in this matchup. And this is a Lobos squad that's been playing with a fire we haven't seen since their 2000s days when they were competing for Mountain West titles. Something about this team feels very different to me. Give me the Lobos to win this one. Danny?
It's going to be a really tough game, but give me BYU to win this one close. It's going to be like a really tough matchup, but I think BYU can win this, but I wouldn't be surprised if Houston...
You mean New Mexico, rather.
Yeah, New Mexico shocks.
Yeah.
Pig Bear, your thoughts on this one?
Mr. White.
You talking about New Mexico or BYU?
New Mexico, but Mormons versus Makers. Had to bite my tongue there. We're a family-friendly show.
I made a little risque joke right there, but you're clear. You're good.
Yeah, but I'm on the hype train. Go Lobos.
Go Lobos. We're all picking New Mexico in this one. Or Danny, you picked BYU there. Pardon me there. Some Big 12 action. Colorado taking on Missouri. Both teams are 0-2 in conference play, but both are extremely hungry. Colorado, number 23, sitting at 4-2. Missouri sitting at 2-4 overall. The Buffs are favored by 6. Colorado won the last matchup last season, 27-24, en route to their Big 12 title last season. Colorado favored by 6. Give me Colorado to remain in the top 25. But even with the win, I don't think they stay in the top 25. I do think they end up getting bounced by a younger team. Danny?
Yeah, give me Colorado to win this one. They'll bounce back, but going to be close. I know Missouri, they might treat this game a bit seriously. I do not know how Missouri fan base is dealing with this, but give me Colorado to win this one close.
Pig Bear?
Screw Colorado, go Tigers. No, I'm kidding here, but yeah, give me Colorado here. Colorado by the spread. Colorado by 6.
Computer. But we're just going to really quick run through the games that or the things that you would have missed. We were just about to finish. We have our 2 games of the week we're going to be talking about here. I can't open the Word at the current moment, so we were just about to talk about the first game. Danny, if you can read off the stuff for that here.
Yep, it is number 7 Penn State at number 22 Wisconsin. Penn State is 6-0 this season, 2-0 in conference. Wisconsin is 5-1 this season, 2-0 in conference. Currently, Wisconsin is favored by 2.5 points. The last time they played an all-time classic. Wisconsin won 49-47 in 8 overtimes. Currently, Penn State is 1-18 against Wisconsin since their 2013 national championship. 1-8 against Wisconsin since their national championship game in 2013.
Yeah, the Badgers have been historically dominant in recent years against Penn State. But I think the Nittany Lions get it done on the road. It's going to be a very hostile environment, but it's going to be quite exciting to see. I think Penn State for sure stakes claim as the best team in the Big Ten with a win over Whiskey. I'll start with Pig Bear here first.
I'm going to go with the betting line here, and I'm going to have to say on Wisconsin. Go Badgers. The number 7 curse stays alive.
All right, Danny, your thoughts?
Yep, give me Wisconsin to win. I believe Wisconsin will keep this one close, but I wouldn't be surprised if Penn State wins.
All right, our next game, we will have a doubleheader that week. We'll be having one game at our typical time of 8:30 and then one later on in the night. All right, the second game is a Pac-10 Classic as Oregon heads to LA to take on USC. More information, Danny?
Yeah. It is number 10 Oregon and number 17 USC. Oregon is 5-1 this season, 3-0 in conference. USC is 4-1 this season, 2-1 in conference. Last time these two teams played, Oregon won 41-17. And Oregon has won the last 5 games against USC. Oregon is favored by 7 points.
Oregon favored by 7. There were USC's 1 loss in the regular season last year, en route to them winning the Pac-10 and playing in the national championship game. I think Oregon does win it and returns to the top of the conference. They have a tough matchup, even tougher than that. After that week, they play Stanford. That'll probably be another destination for us, which will be funny if that happens, because we'll be going from Penn State to a game with Penn State to USC, or to a game with Oregon to another game with Oregon. So we'll be going back-to-back Penn States and back-to-back Oregons. That is if we do end up going to Oregon Stanford, which we likely will. Overall, the Ducks are favored. I think Oregon does win it. Pig Bear?
Yeah, give me Oregon to win this one.
All right. Danny, you already mentioned?
Yeah. The only thing I gotta say, it is Oregon wins it.
There's the soundboard. For those who didn't, or for those watching, Danny warned us that he was going to use his soundboard once during the stream, and it was quite intimidating. But we managed to slip that in just in time. Thank you all for watching in spite of the errors at play. Don't forget to tune in on Saturday for 2 games. It was Penn State, Wisconsin, and Oregon, USC. That's going to do it for us today here. Thank you all for watching, and so long from the 2KU.